I would say to most of us tonight that the Apostle Paul is a rather impressive figure to us. He is someone that we might look up to. We're impressed with his spirituality, his maturity, his ability to endure. We read from his writings nearly every time we assemble. One New Testament scholar who's written quite a lot about the Apostle Paul has described in a more lighthearted way as Paul sort of a high-maintenance friend. To humanize him a little bit, if you look at some of his travels and the way some of the things that he did, maybe in being released from prison, the authorities were going to let him and Silas go, and Paul says, "Well, hold on a second. You're going to come and you're going to make an apology for this unlawful arrest that I was a Roman." You could imagine Silas saying, "Hey, just let's just go. Leave it alone." But one of the things that continues to impress people about Paul and why he is given credibility, why people continue to be drawn to him, that there's got to be an explanation for him, mainly because of the fact that he was a man who seemed to have everything to gain, and he gave it all up. What kind of a person does that? There are few people in life who may be up and coming and have a world of potential, a lot going for them, and then just walk away from it all. That's strange and unusual. Maybe occasionally we see that in different areas of life, and we're surprised. Maybe it's an athlete who retires early from what we think is early, and we just can't understand all of that. But Paul, of course, in his background, he's someone who, among the Jewish community, was a very respected man. He was the future. Was going to inevitably have a seat on the Sanhedrin Council, and I'll tell you, there is no more prestigious position that a Jewish man could ever attain than to be on that council. And yet, one day he walked away from all of it. And of course we know why, because he had an encounter with the risen Lord. And because of that, he gave up his life and found new life in serving the resurrected Lord. In spite of everything that he sacrificed, in spite of everything that he gave up, and he gave up a lot, when he wrote about the blessings that were available in the resurrected Lord, he talked about gain. For example, in 1 Timothy chapter 4, in verse 8, he says, "Godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come." That's quite perplexing that a man who walked away from everything could write about what appeared to be little that he had, but yet talk about the gain of godliness. Gain that he had received that was valuable in the present life and also in the life to come. Now, we have a tendency, I suppose, and for good reason, to focus on the gain of the life to come. And that's good that we would think about and talk about and study about the life to come. But sometimes we forget about the present life that we now have and how there are blessings that are available to us now that can be experienced. And I wonder sometimes if we think that we've gained some things. Are there some things that our faith in the resurrected Lord have done for us in a very practical way that we're grateful for, that we're willing to sacrifice in order to receive some things, some very present blessings in our life? So with that in mind, tonight we'll spend just a few minutes talking about the value of godliness. First of all, godliness is valuable because of the firm foundation that it offers. The Bible has quite a lot to say about foundations, but godliness offers a firm foundation. in a number of different areas, but if we just briefly talk about 3 areas. Godliness offers a firm foundation for faith. You can't go through this life without believing in something. Everybody believes in something. Well, what about a godly life and a foundation of faith that it provides? What is the foundation of the faith that we profess, the faith that Paul sacrificed to advance in the world? Well, of course, that faith, the foundation of that faith is Jesus. Now, Paul, as a Jew, had somewhat of a foundation to begin with. He understood who the Creator was and what the Creator had planned to do as His will was expressed in the Scriptures and by the prophets. But yet that foundation was nothing. That foundation was absolutely nothing without a cornerstone. Who was the cornerstone? Well, the cornerstone, as it turned out, was the very one that Paul had been rejecting, that he finally encountered on his travel to Damascus one day. And he realized that he could not deny him any longer. There he was, a man who had been crucified, yet standing before him in a bodily form. Paul had the same kind of experience that all of the other apostles and the other witnesses of the resurrected Lord, and there were many. They just could not deny him. They couldn't turn away from him. Instead, they had to appeal. They had to give their lives to him. And if that meant sacrificing, then so be it. You and I, we need a firm foundation for belief. There are a lot of people in the world today who act as if they don't know what to believe, who to believe. Yet here we all are living in the present, trying to make sense of our lives in this world. Well, Christianity offers us a foundation for faith. It offers a foundation for life. That's what this text is about. It holds promise for the present life. In 2 Peter chapter 1, in those opening lines in verses 3 and 4, Peter writes how God, as our Creator, has provided everything that we need as it relates to life and to godliness. Sometimes we like to sort of parse things out. But what Paul understood and what Peter understood was that Christ offered something for our present existence in a very practical way. Does your life have a foundation? Now, there are all kinds of things that happen to us in life that rock us, that shake us, that cause us to question and doubt everything that we know and hold to. Yet, through Christ, He's constant. He's stable. He offers us a choice to make. He describes the blessings of a firm foundation, for example, in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7 that most of you are well familiar with. 2 men who went through life, they both built houses, they both had storms, but one man's house stood and the other's was destroyed. Well, what made the difference? The difference was in the foundation. Godliness offers us a foundation for our family. And you can see how all of these 3 ideas all come together. Because here we are, having to believe something in this life with our families, guiding and directing our families. There are lots of questions that come up in family life. There are questions that our children have. There are things that our children are exposed to for which they need explanation. Well, how are you going to find an explanation? I'm often at a loss, and I've hardly gotten started. Imagine trying to raise a family without God, raising a family without the foundation of Christ. How would you explain anything? How would you explain the purpose of it all, the meaning of it all? In The Plain Path, if you were able to read it, I wrote about family and the value of family as I have experienced it and as you have experienced it. And what Solomon tells us in the 127th Psalm is, unless the Lord builds the house, those who labor build it in vain. Isn't it interesting how the Bible brings all of these ideas together? Who's building your house? Well, again, we're all building. Even Solomon acknowledges that. Solomon says, though, is if you build without the Lord, your efforts are for nothing. Because one day that storm's going to come, and you're going to be left to try to weather it without a foundation. We need to, as I wrote in that article, we need to bring our families around the table to talk about life, to talk about God, to talk about the Bible. I will be working here at the office some days in thinking and working things out in my mind, and then I'll think, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to ask my two boys, what do they think about this concept that I've been working with all day? And I'm amazed at the answers that I get. It makes for great conversation starters around the table. Have those conversations with your family, with your children. It's invaluable. Another reason why godliness is valuable in the present life is because godliness offers a good reputation. It can form a reputation. Why do you behave the way you behave? Why do you make the kinds of decisions that you make? Why do you take the positions that you might take? In Proverbs chapter 22 in verse 1, Solomon says, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver and gold. I mean, the Apostle Paul is the prime example of what we're talking about here, isn't it? He did not have great riches. But what a reputation. What a reputation that he retains 2,000 some years later. It's incredible. Now, that doesn't mean that Paul was perfect or without flaw. He was, frequently wrote about his sin. He was deeply humble about who he was and where he stood before God. But yet, we continue to draw on him as an example. There is no substitute. There is no substitute for a good reputation. We all have a reputation. We're all known for being something or for being someone. And that reputation is formed in those daily interactions that we have with people, daily interactions that we may not give much thought to or think that are significant, but over time, they leave an impression with people. What kind of a reputation are you trying to forge? Now, in Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 1, it warns, dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. It's hard. It's hard to recover a reputation. It's not impossible, but my oh my is it difficult and hard to do. Of course, none of us are going to get through this life without sin, without making mistakes, without acting in self-serving ways. I recognize that fully. But we need to give consideration to how we're being thought of. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about honesty and the importance of honesty and how honesty relates to reputation and how it can serve us well in our daily lives. Make no mistake about it, your reputation can carry you a very long way in this world. Then lastly tonight, godliness is valuable because of the hope for the future. And that's what this text that we were looking at. Godliness is of value in every way as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. Now, we are all looking for hope. We're all looking for hope right now, tonight. We can see things that are wrong in our lives, perhaps wrong in the world, and we want to make things right. We want to make things better. And godliness gives us a path about how we can try to right the world. That's what we're trying to do as Christians, through teaching the gospel. We're trying to right the world. That's sharing in God's work. That's what God's work is all about, setting aright a world that is broken and disjointed because of sin. Well, what hope is there that it can happen? Well, you and I serve as examples that it can, as we have sought to allow the gospel to set us aright. And as we try to influence others around us, we try to do the same for them. Don't give up hope in the power of the gospel to continue to save people today. I think sometimes we give up hope. Well, people don't want to listen anymore. So sometimes it's the older generation, incidentally. I'll pick on the older generation. It's the older generation sometimes who gives up hope. I had an encounter one time with a couple that Elizabeth and I loved dearly. And all they would just talk about how they just thought, the best days of this world were over and done. And they're, going on and on like this when I'm in my 20s, and I'm thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? There's got to be hope. I'm just getting started, but we can become hopeless. And as we become hopeless about the world, that affects what we think about the gospel's effectiveness. What do you think about the gospel's effectiveness? God, its power to save people even today, in 2022, in the United States of America, in Houston, Texas, in Katy, Texas. Does it still have resonance? Well, I think that it does. And I think if Paul were here tonight, he would remind us that yes, it does. But the hope for the future is also about not just the present, but about the life to come. And the life to come is what is supposed to give us motivation for our present lives, our present labor. Because of the hope that we have afforded through us by the resurrected Lord, Paul assures us in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 that the labor that we expend in this life is not for nothing. So the next time you have a hard go of it, the next time you're feeling down about the future, just remember that your efforts are not for nothing because of the promise of a resurrected Savior. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there's tremendous value in godliness, value that we can have now. However, as it relates to things that are of value, they are worthless unless we invest in them. To what extent are you investing in godliness? That'll go a long way to answer the questions that maybe we've brought up tonight about whether or not we feel that there is any present value to godliness. If you're not investing in it, you're not gaining anything from it. You certainly won't gain anything from it in the life to come. So I would encourage us all to make greater investments in a godly life, to know and appreciate the blessings of it now and in the hope of the future. I thank you for your kind attention tonight. I hope the lesson has been encouraging as we think about living a godly life in the present world. If there's someone here tonight who's not been living a godly life, you have an opportunity now to make things right, to allow God to work in you and through you, to forgive you. As a child of God who's gone back into the world, you can be restored tonight if you're willing to confess your wrong and have the brethren here pray for you and with you. If you've never obeyed the gospel, you have an opportunity to do that. You can be baptized tonight to share in the hope of a resurrected Lord. If you're subject to the invitation, we'd encourage you to come forward and make your request known right now as together we stand and sing.